Hello again, friends, and welcome back to Sunshine Strategies Radio. I'm Jen McMillan, founder of Sunshine Strategies and mom of three dedicated to providing good trouble and fierce kindness to families of Illinois. And if you're new to our podcast or this newsletter, please go back and listen to our belated Giving Tuesday episode. Last week, I explained a little bit about how I developed this hybrid nonprofit consulting model and the importance of my first donation from one of my friends named Bill. Now, this week, I wanted to highlight Project Taphafile, but there's been a few developments, and I want to work on that a little bit more and present it next week. So hopefully you will be patient with me. Part of the process of Sunshine Strategies, I like to think of as radical transparency. Um, because people don't believe you when you show up and just want to help, I'm documenting everything that I'm doing as much as I can, and with permission, of course, of what this process looks like. So that's what this podcast is. You're getting a behind the scenes of how Jen's brain works and how we get to the projects that I'm working on. So this whole model, though, is based in rural philanthropy. And that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about a bit today, because I know that that is a topic that's hard for people to talk about because we just don't talk and focus on rural communities very often. And I think philanthropy is a very unique way for us to tell that story about rural values and how you treat people when you politely ask them for a donation. So I grew up in Macoupin, Jersey County area in southwestern Illinois. Very rural. I was in a consolidated school district. So I grew up in rural philanthropy. We would go out and fundraise. We would, the FFA would do a farm plot and we would sell whatever we grew as a fundraiser. So I'm familiar with that. And then one of my friends at the University of Illinois Springfield, where I got my master's degree, she added to that education because she too grew up in rural Illinois. So she was able to help me kind of match the skills that I had already growing up where I did with more formalized practice. And it was super helpful. But I never really put it into practice until I went to Lincoln College. And I was or not the major giving officer there. I was the annual giving officer there, working day to day on telling the story of Lincoln College and its students. So I got to know a lot of donors there, and a couple that I will never forget. They're two of the best humans that I've met. Sorry, Bill Rhoda, you're not alone. Um, they're Bill and Jean Gossett. And I know a lot of my friends will recognize those names because they're this vibrant couple if you ever got the chance to meet them. And they were always clearly in love when they were together after a lifetime of building memories in Lincoln, Illinois. They were people that built that town and then turned around and gave back to it whenever they could to thank their community and friends, like us at Lincoln College. Bill and Jean not only provided scholarships, they would show up to events, they would donate on the spot. Bill will loan his voice to this day to tell you all the good things that Logan County, Lincoln College, and Lincoln, Illinois have to offer. That's just the rural way. But Bill and Jean, they both had lived entire lives before I met them. Hell, maybe even a life or two for Bill. At this point, he was retired when I met him, and he just was enjoying being a grandparent and a friend and flirting. He still enjoys flirting, by the way, as do I. Nothing wrong with a little good natured flirting, but it's a little more dangerous now that he's single. You see, Jean passed away a couple of years ago, but I was thankful that even though I wasn't able to tell her goodbye myself, that she went quickly and that she didn't have time to worry about it. So after I bawled my eyes out after talking to Mr. Gossett, because it was just so lovely to talk to him, I messaged my historian friend that's still at Lincoln College, Ron Keller. He is the director at the Lincoln Heritage Museum and also another friend of Bill. I assumed that I was just paranoid. Surely somebody had done an oral history on this man. Somebody has to share the story. It's not. I talked to Ron, and he's tried in the past to sit down with Mr. Gossett and do an interview. And in fact, he even has notes prepared somewhere. Again, Ron, reminder that I will need those notes. So the other day, as I was working on this episode, we created a new project. We're gearing up to not only record Mr. Gossett and my friend Marge Evans, but I'm hoping to bring StoryCorps to our area sometime in the next year because there are so many stories that I want to capture of not only my older friends that I know may not have a lot of time left with us, but just some of these really remarkable stories of success, of loss, of challenges that we face down here in downstate Illinois. So I really wanted to take that opportunity to turn this project into something that would celebrate not just those two friends, but as many as we can. So I'm working on that, which is a unique proposition being on the NPR Illinois Advisory Board. So look forward to more updates here on this podcast about that one. I still have to get them to agree to participate, of course, but just fingers crossed, please. Mr. Gossett, I would really love to interview. I will be gentle. So, the other day when I was writing this episode, I was out again at a cemetery, and it was a bit chilly. They were calling for snow showers off and on all day. And after I talked to Ron at the Heritage Museum, I needed to make one more stop before I left. Because every time I'm in Lincoln, I'm sad. Like its namesake, Lincoln has always had a bit of tragedy around it. Most recently, it was the closure of two higher educational facilities, one of which has the historic University Hall, which is the first building on the first college campus named for our 16th president. Then you had the possible closure of the correctional facility that's come up, and that's the only thing that I can see that's held that town together since the college was closed. And then you add in two major fires that I'm aware of in the downtown area. If any town's signature color is Abe's funeral black, it's Lincoln, Illinois. And as I sit here visiting with Robert Latham, I have to wonder what he would think of his beloved town. You see, he too liked to write missives like mine in this podcast. Robert was a prominent member of the Logan County community, serving as sheriff and brother to a senator, Philip Clayton Latham Sr., who lived in Springfield. Robert's home often served as a boarding house for lawyers on the circuit, including my favorite, Mr. Lincoln, who in fact provided the legal services to found Lincoln, Illinois. But did you know that Senator Philip Latham was killed in Shawneetown on business? I didn't either until the other day. And after discussing this oral history project with Ron, our conversation returned to Lincoln. We both love the mission of the college to prepare anyone through a quality education, no matter where they come from. So, taphophile as I am, I had to go find Mr. Latham and check on him. It took a bit of circling around, but I finally found him in the cemetery. And you know what they say about assuming things, right? I'd never been to Old Union Cemetery before, but it is quite beautiful. A mixture of new and old. I got my bearings and began looking for context clues to find the marker. So, Mr. Robert Latham died in 1895, was a prominent member of the community, and wealthy. So, off I went to look for a mausoleum, or a large obelisk, or even a dresser-sized headstone. People's afterlife in the cemetery usually reflects a little bit of who they were in real life. And a large marker would make sense. Well, if you don't know what they say about assuming things, it's that it can make an ass out of you and me. And that's what happened the other day, because I forgot that Lincoln College was named after Mr. Lincoln, because Illinoisans, especially us rural ones, aren't flashy. They give their wealth back to their community, like Mr. Gossett. And because of my assumption, I drove past Mr. Latham 3 times before I finally pulled up findagrave.com to find what kind of marker I was looking for. A slightly curved one with just his name sitting low to the ground. Well, crap, this is going to be harder now. But thankfully, it included a photo, and I was able to locate a landmark in the background. And I found the Lathams are in the corner next to the cemetery office, which is convenient because the office is blocking the cold wind, bringing the storm clouds in as I write this. So Mr. Latham didn't need any more recognition. A simple family plot with matching curved stones. And working at the college with the Lincoln Papers, which started back in 2003, thank you, Peggy Dunn, I knew there were at least 2 letters in the collection that related to the Lathams. The first one that I could remember was the letter that Mr. Latham had written to his friend Abraham, naming the college in his honor in 1865, right before his death. But the second letter I had trouble remembering. After a quick search, I found it, and it was written 5 years before the letter I remembered, in 1860. From President Lincoln to a young man named George Latham, who was disappointed that he hadn't been accepted to Harvard University. And according to another Lincoln historian, Roy Bassler, and I'll put the link in the episode description, Abraham Lincoln wrote this now classic letter of encouragement to a close friend of his eldest son, Robert. Both boys had been raised in Springfield, attending Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, and were Harvard hopefuls. Several months later, both would travel to the president-elect on his inaugural journey. Robert eventually was graduated from Harvard, while George studied at Yale for 2 years. The letter reveals Lincoln's concern for a boy whose father died several years before. You remember our senator killed in Shawneetown? As well as his own passion for education and determination to persevere. At first glance, the pain referred to seems overstated, but probably not to someone who carved out his own education by great effort and lacked the finances to attend prep school or college. Excuse me. So again, this was written from Abraham Lincoln to George Latham in 1860. My dear George, I had scarcely felt greater pain in my life than on learning yesterday from Bob's letter that you had failed to enter Harvard. And yet there is very little truth in it if you allow no feeling of discouragement to seize and prey upon you. It is certain truth that you can enter and graduate in Harvard University, and having made the attempt, you must succeed in it. Must is the word. I know not how to aid you, save the assurance of one of mature age and much severe experience, that you cannot fail if you resolutely determined that you will not. The president of Harvard can scarcely be other than a kind man, and doubtless he would grant you an interview, and point out the readiest way to remove or overcome the obstacles which have thwarted you. In your temporary failure, there is no evidence that you may not yet be a better scholar and a more successful man in the great struggle of life than many others who have entered college more easily. Again, I say, let no feeling of discouragement prey upon you, and in the end, you are sure to succeed. With a more common interest, I subscribe myself. Very truly your friend, A. Lincoln. Now, about here is where I went down the rabbit hole. In the middle of Old Union Cemetery, as snow is on its way. Because that letter that I just read to you, to George, was a letter from Uncle Abe, not President Abraham Lincoln. You see, Abe knew George's dad and rode the 8th Circuit with him. Remember Philip Clayton Latham Sr.? I'm fairly certain that Philip's dad was one of the first judges in the area, but please, fellow historians, let me know. I also learned today that Senator Latham, after having several kids with his wife Catherine, was killed at the age of 44 in a lightning strike when a tree fell on him. I know it really does sound unbelievable, but I did verify it with a friend who is an actual historian, and this happened in Shawneetown. So we may have to keep digging into this story. But after Senator Latham died, I'm fairly certain that his kids went to Lincoln to live with Uncle Robert in his home. From there, we know that George Latham and Robert Todd Lincoln grew up together, according to Springfield's early schools. Now, Robert Todd Lincoln entered the preparatory department at Illinois State University. He was one of the youngest of 52 fellow students. Classes were held in the Mechanics Union Hall on the east side of 3rd Street between Washington and Adams. But wait, I was confused. Illinois State University has always been in Normal. And in fact, it came after the land-grant university charters of the U of I in Champaign-Urbana. So, of course, I would go back to the internet. And then a few phone calls later to very confused historian friends, because I wanted to know where George ended up going to school when he didn't get into Harvard. Side note, I didn't get into Harvard either, and I too ended up in Springfield studying and finding my passion. It turns out that Illinois State University at Springfield, in this version of history, in this history book back when it was written, was a predecessor of what is now Carthage College. But I'd argue that this Illinois State University at Springfield, that Robert Todd Lincoln and George attended, was also the predecessor of Lincoln College. I mean, it's probably even Millikan University's predecessor as well, but that's a different story for a different day. With my mind specifically on Lincoln College, I've been pondering this letter again from my friend, Mr. Lincoln. So I want to focus on a couple of sections for you. He says, you cannot fail if you resolutely determine that you will not. And that you need to point out the readiest way to remove or overcome the obstacles which have thwarted you. From there, he shares that there's no evidence that you may not yet be a better scholar or more successful in life than many others who were readily accepted to college. And in the end, you will succeed because you decided to succeed. But life got in the way of George's path, as it did everyone during that time period and really throughout history. At that point, there was a war. The country was in political turmoil, and at that point, he was just a sheriff's stepson from Logan County. In another life, his uncle Robert Latham could have been president, because when Logan County needed a sheriff, he stepped up. When his brother's kids needed a home, especially when his only son died at 3, he stepped up. And when his stepson George didn't get into that fancy Harvard school, again, he stepped up. Just like Mr. Lincoln, his friend, did. But instead of running for president, he rests quietly in Logan County, surrounded by family and friends. And actually, I think Abe might be a bit jealous of his friend, sitting over in Springfield entombed alone. Robert's stepson George grew up with the president's son. The rail splitter who bucked the educated rich people out east was now the president. And even in 1860, during the height of his popularity after being nominated as the presidential nominee for this newfangled party of misfits, Mr. Lincoln took the time to share how he did it with his son's best friend, who was disappointed. Don't let them tell you no. Instead, in 1864, Robert Latham went to work with a couple of friends to donate land and money to what would become Lincoln University, or rather what we knew it as Lincoln College. In 1865, on Abe's last birthday, the school's cornerstone was laid. There's a lot more to the story, but a big part of it was there in that cemetery with me when I wrote this piece. The families of Logan County, from Mr. Latham to the Bumcrots, all built this town on the hope and excitement of a changing America, one that afforded opportunities to everyone, no matter who they were or where they came from. And for 157 years, Lincoln College did that. And I'm proud to say that I got to be a part of it for a short time. But, and I'm sorry, Mr. Gossett, like you, time is running out for Lincoln College. Since COVID, it's sat empty, with Lincoln Christian College, or Lincoln Christian University, soon closing after it. While its siblings, Carthage, Millikan, Illinois State, and the University of Illinois itself, have adapted and changed over the years, Lincoln, Illinois didn't get the same wins. Luck only struck once so far, when the railroad needed a spot for water between two major towns. So I guess what I'm hoping for is that I can help create a little bit more luck for the college that was created in the spirit of my friend, Abraham Lincoln, by his friend, Robert Latham. And with that, please let me know if you would like to help. You can always donate at sunshinestrategies.org and click on the donate button. Please do follow us on our newsletter as we work on these projects. I will be asking those people first for help as we work on these. One project has bubbled up from Project Taphafile already today. So, Becky, I will be holding you to that. We've got some exciting things in the works. So please like, follow, share, subscribe, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you, guys.